United, we're as strong as a mountain.
So we're here at the CFT convention, 2023 CFT convention in San Francisco, and one of the delegates from City College AFT 2121 is Rick Baum. So maybe you can talk about some of the issues that you feel have to be addressed at this convention and your effort to take up some of these issues at the convention.
Clearly, the country is going through a major crisis on many different fronts. There's threat of nuclear warfare, there's the threat to the environment, and then on a more local level or even nationwide level, there's a threat to public education. And I would hope that the threat would be taken a lot more seriously than it has been. It seems that a lot of things are being pushed under the rug that shouldn't be, and where you have a large group of people, you really want to organize a large group if you're serious about bringing about changes that are going to provide people with greater educational opportunities, which I would argue are being taken away from people by all these changes taking place with the charter schools and in many respects the underfunding of public education in this country. One of the things that I was focusing on here is that my union has a resolution to impose a wealth tax on people who are worth more than $500 million or $50 million, and if they're worth between $50 million and $1 billion, they'd be charged 1% of their wealth. If they're worth more than $1 billion, it'd be 1.5% of their wealth. And I think that's a good idea, but I think it needs to go a lot further than they are proposing. So I put together some changes that I went to the meeting where they were processing the resolution. The changes that I was putting forward is that everyone now pays a wealth tax, and it's called a property tax. And if you're a homeowner, you pay a yearly property tax, which is supposed to be on the value of your home, not on your equity in the home, but it would also include a tax on the mortgage that you hold. Or they're paying a wealth tax on behalf of their landlords when you pay rent, because the landlord will take part of the rent received and use it to pay their property taxes. And I would say, first of all, you want to make this wealth tax proposal popular. A way to make it popular is to provide people with relief of all the taxes that they're getting hit with. So I was proposing to dramatically increase what's called the property tax exemption in California, where you are exempt from paying tax on the $7,000 of value of your home. That number hasn't changed for years, and to make it more meaningful, I was going to propose to raise something like, say, $100,000 so that the typical homeowner would then save at least $1,000 a year in their property taxes. As far as renters are concerned, we have a renter's tax credit that for an individual comes to $60 a year. That hasn't gone up for years, and that's, peanuts now when you look at how much people are paying for rent. And I was proposing that be increased to, say, $1,000 or more and be refundable. As things stand now, it only reduces your taxes, but if you don't have paying any taxes, you don't get any of the renter's credit. And they also have an income threshold. So if your income is something like above around $45,000, I'm guessing, you don't get the renter's credit. So it should be refundable for everybody. And that way, that would attract a lot of popular support for something like a wealth tax. But to pay for it, I think that you have to have a much higher rate of taxation on billionaires, which is really absent from this thing. The 1.5% is what a lot of people currently pay on their property taxes, 1.5% of the value. And frankly, someone like Mark Zuckerberg does not really need $65 billion. In fact, as far as I'm concerned, no human being should be allowed to accumulate that kind of wealth. $1 billion is probably already too much. And so I was proposing that we have a much heavier tax or rate of taxation on those who are the super wealthy, and probably reduce it so that it doesn't hit people with 50 million, but maybe raise it to 100 to 200 million. That way it's easier to administer. And so I was calling for not only a higher tax rate on these folks, but a heavy penalty if they cheat on their evaluation of their property, like say 50% of the tax that they're avoiding by cheating. Like right now, they just changed this, but if someone is supposed to take money out of their retirement plan and they fail to do so, the penalty is 50%. So why not have a penalty of 50% on these wealthy people if they try to evade the tax? And that way you could pay for this property tax relief that I was talking about, or this wealth tax relief, and have a lot more money to pay for things. This current proposal, they estimated would raise about $20 billion a year, and all that does is cover what they anticipate to be the current deficit in the state budget. And where's that going to get us? Last year they had a $97 billion surplus, and did they provide it and spend it on things that were really needed? Yeah, they may have given more money for education, but a lot of it didn't go to really funding education the way that that the state should be. When I put this forward as a proposal, I was told that, and I don't know the rules, that you have a committee to process the resolutions, but they cannot make any substantive changes to the resolutions that are going to be taken up by the whole body today at the convention. And so they said, mine are out of order. They may not have been voted for by the people there, but they basically said they're substantive, therefore we cannot change the resolutions. They did that at another committee, I was told, and it kind of ticked off people. Like, what's the point of having a committee to process resolutions? And my committee only had 2 resolutions that they had to process. They had 2 hours to do it in. If you cannot suggest,
It was an amendment to the resolution.
Yeah, it was essentially as a friendly amendment to make it stronger, to make it more popular, and doing things that I think we do need to redistribute wealth in this country. We've been redistributing wealth for a good 30, 40 years, from the middle class, poor people, on up to the super wealthy, like your Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates of this world. And it's time that we reverse this, and that's what a wealth tax would hopefully accomplish. But theirs is so minuscule that it's hardly going to have an impact on the.
Why is that?
Why is it? I think they see that this is the only way they can get it through the state legislature. This is the only way that Democrats might sign on to it. Although
the Democrats can amend anything that's presented to them.
Well, yeah, and even one of the people speaking there yesterday was like a former union official, saying they don't expect the state legislature to pass the wealth tax, and they're going to have to go the way of an initiative. Well, go the way of an initiative, make it something that would resonate with people and provide them with the relief that they need, because especially right now with all the cuts that are going to be coming down in terms of food support programs, in terms of Medicaid, that maybe not so much in California, but a lot of people are being kicked off the rolls of these things. They're going to need more money just to get by in their day-to-day lives. And so we really have to be thinking in these bigger terms of transferring wealth in ways that are going to benefit the population that's living in poverty. When I walked here today to come to this meeting, I saw 3 homeless people spread out on sidewalks trying to sleep, and I'm just going, what kind of society allows this to happen to people living in the society? Why aren't these people getting the services that they so obviously need, so they are not crashed out on the street? Maybe they're drug addicted. I don't know what.
Well, the union has supported the Democratic Party. That's what they mobilize around. They spend millions of dollars supporting Democratic politicians. You think that that's going to be that's one of the reasons they didn't want a real tax on the billionaires?
And let's just say broadly they support the Democrats, even though over and over again the Democrats have screwed them over. Like, I went to a workshop yesterday, and it was led by a former CFT president, very articulate, Marty Hillman, and one other person, and he was bemoaning the fact that all these educational reforms coming down from the Gates Foundation, the Lumina Foundation, that are taking away educational opportunities, this guided pathway to have basically community colleges just used to train people in jobs, and to train people so they can transfer to 4-year schools, and no community education, lifelong learning, and things like that. And he says every Democrat was supporting these things unanimously in the legislature, and they like to think it's out of ignorance, but they're asking, how can we get these people not to support these things? And I'm just thinking, well, the union constantly, they support these things even though the union opposes this kind of legislation, and then they turn around in the next election and endorse these people again and give them funds. It's like, you get screwed over and over again. I guess, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, I'm a fool. And they've been fooled 4, 5, 6 times by now by supporting these people who are basically putting forward agendas that are very harmful to what the union likes to think that they're fighting for and trying to achieve.
And one of the big issues in California nationally is privatization of charters, outsourcing. Is that raised? Are there any resolutions at this convention around those issues?
I don't think any of the resolutions address that issue. Jeff Freitas today, the president of the CFT, gave a speech, and I don't know if he discussed that. What he did discuss, which was dear to my heart, was that we have to end our two-tier system in which, a large percent of the teachers, probably even more than half of the teachers in higher ed, are adjuncts or part-timers with no job security, paid poorly, and super exploited. We saw that with the UC graduate students and researchers who were recently on strike, and we see this across the country in many other places. And this is a big problem within the community colleges in which I work.
Why wouldn't they address privatization in charters, since it's a major issue in setting up a two-tier system in public education and outsourcing, and Lumina, these big foundations, want to privatize?
If I was to speculate, it's like a fact on the ground that they've come to accept, to live with. Their approach is probably one in which, let's try to organize, and I think they may have had some success, organize the teachers in these charter schools, as opposed to shutting down the charter schools, which are a threat to public education, because the resources that should be going more to public education is now being shifted over to these charter schools.
Andy Weingarten, the president of the AFT, is going to be here today. She has gone to Ukraine many times to support Ukraine, supporting U.S. aid to Ukraine. 115 billion is going there. Is there any resolution at the convention that money should be going to education instead of war? I mean, the military-industrial complex.
No, on the war, and almost certain there's no resolution.
Why is that?
Well,
Do you
because
think the teachers here support the war?
I think that a lot of people see that the Ukrainians have been viciously attacked by the Russians, that they're fighting to protect their sovereignty, and that they support that particular effort. Now, I think it's a much more complex issue than that. From my own perspective, I see that the United States is using the Ukrainians as cannon fodder to weaken the Russians. And so their society is just being devastated and destroyed. It's horrifying because it brings together all the worst things that are going on in this country. The war in Ukraine is benefiting the military-industrial complex.
You have the United Educators of San Francisco, which likes to call itself a progressive local. You have the UTLA, 30,000 members. They call themselves progressive. Why are these unions, which call themselves progressive, silent about the question of the war at this convention?
Yeah, well, the word progressive is just a substitute for what I would call Cold War liberalism many times. There are progressives who don't hold those positions, but people don't like the word liberal anymore, so instead they substitute the word progressive because that makes you feel more warm and fuzzy inside. So everybody in San Francisco is a progressive. I can't imagine any politician in San Francisco not calling themselves a progressive, as is true with the people who run my particular college, the Board of Trustees. Now, maybe that's changed with the new people who've been elected, but before that, they probably all call themselves progressive. Well, I was handing out statements that City College of San Francisco HEAP put together, where an organization of students, faculty, concerned community members, and we put forward a 13-point plan that the three candidates for the Board of Trustees that were endorsed by the union, who were elected, embraced. And we want to inform people about these things because we see that they could be used, if they're acted upon, to reverse the destruction that's taking place at City College.
And, one of them was a question of the FICMAT, which sent a letter demanding cutbacks. They've also done that at other school districts. Did that come up here? Is there any mention of FICMAT at this convention that you've heard about?
No. Okay. No. And FICMAT is a dangerous organization. They are targeting urban schools like in LA, Oakland, and City College of San Francisco, the Peralta schools, which happen to be the schools that mainly have a student body of working class students and students of color, and they're coming up with ways. They always look at the finances and say they're flawed, they have to make all these cuts, and if they don't, then we're going to take them over, and they're basically taking away from the educational opportunities of this group of students.
So why wouldn't that come up or even be discussed at this convention of the California Federation of Teachers?
Maybe not FICMAT in particular, but I think people are aware of the issues of what's happening to the urban
Well, the question is what the union is going to do about it.
Well, I haven't gone to all the various workshops, but the ones that I've gone to, no. And I just went to one where this person who just recently elected to the Oakland School Board spoke at the last few minutes as on elected school board officials with union ties. And I went up to her afterwards and said, what are you going to do about FCMAT when they start to crack down on you? Because Oakland School Board did a great thing. They reversed the closure of many of the schools that are happening every year in Oakland. They said no more. But they're going to be under the gun from FCMAT, from the county, I think it's the county charge of education, I forget the exact name of the position. And so I suggested to her, you need to get together with people in all these other school districts that are under attack, like Los Angeles, and unify with them to fight groups like FCMAT, which are people there to impose austerity on on the school district and make further cuts in the educational opportunities of the students. But again, when has this society had much concern about the educational opportunities of working class students and students of color?
What about the salaries of these officials?
Well, to me, that's a problem because you have a lot of dues-paying members who are living in poverty. In fact, I think Jeff Freitas today, the president of the CFT, referred to one who is so marginal that she uses some of her money to get an Airbnb, and then when that money runs out, she sleeps in her car for a few days. And at the same time, her dues is supporting these top union officials, like Randy Weingarten, who's going to be speaking today, who has a salary of more than $500,000. There are other top officials in the AFT with $200,000, $300,000 salaries, and the same is true with the top brass in the California Federation of Teachers. And I just find that how can you justify getting paid that kind of money when your own members are living in poverty? What should they do instead? It would be more symbolic, but I think that any union leader should never get paid more than what the average person that they represent gets paid. And that would be a fair thing. It would create a lot more respect for them. They still have their expense account, but I think that would be a better approach. I think it was done by the United Electrical Workers years ago. And to me, that would make a big difference because, boy, when you have these union bosses making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year, they can't relate to the conditions of the people they represent.
And is there any challenge here to the Democratic Party? I mean, you have a Democratic Party is imposing austerity. Did anyone talk about that?
No, I think there's just an ongoing embracing of the Democratic Party. I guess they see that they're the only alternative. So they're the alternative to the Republican dinosaurs, but they're a flawed alternative. And again, I always feel that one of the problems is the union constantly is endorsing the Democrats and supporting them and giving them funds in elections, but they don't make demands on them. So in other words, they endorse these people, but there's just, they're good people. They often have supported us, so we want to endorse them again, when they should have a list of what they want. And what a union like this should be saying in their list, we want full funding of public education.
Wouldn't that require tax going after the billionaires?
Well, you could also shift how you're spending money, like in the national budget, you could shift it away.
But I mean, in California, they were opposed to even your amendment.
Well, I can't say they were opposed to it.
They wouldn't allow a vote on it. Is that?
Yeah, but that's their bureaucratic flaws. They did that in some other committees.
I mean, you're a delegate. You made an amendment, and you're going to try to raise it on the floor here today.
I might. I'll see. I might see what happens. I mean, I did talk with Jeff Freitas about it, which I've never spoken with him before, and we went out in the hallway and had a discussion for a few minutes. I gave him the flyer I wrote, and he seemed open to it because, again, they're going to want to win, and if this is going to help them to win my ideas, then maybe they will embrace it. That's to be seen. Though what they will do is to make a distinction between what they call the corporate Democrats and the progressive Democrats. And so, some of the progressive Democrats, of course, they're going to vote the right way on many things, but they're usually fairly powerless. And when push comes to shove, they give in, as we saw with the so-called squad in Congress. For the most part, they gave in to Pelosi, went along with basically the flawed agreement on the railroad workers, not granting them the sick leave that was just reasonable that they should be getting, and they are very much lock, stock, and barrel supporting the ongoing war in Ukraine without, I don't see that any alternatives being put forward. And that war in Ukraine, let's remember, there's a greater issue than a country's national security, which is the survival of the human species. If that war gets out of hand, we could have a nuclear war. There's also the danger of the nuclear power plants in Ukraine that could be damaged terribly and put probably millions of people's health at risk. So that war needs to be settled just for the fate of humanity. And it's not even discussed in many places where you would expect a discussion like this. Instead, you have discussions about why we should be supporting and sending more military hardware to the Ukrainians. And this is not unique to the Democrats. This is the so-called some anti-war leftists that put forward this kind of position. Well, anti-war leftists, I don't know if I'd want to associate them with the left, but you have a lot of people who are pro the support of the Ukrainians, seeing that this is a just cause, even though their head of state was put up by an oligarch. That's why he's in power. And their union policies, from everything I've read, are pretty troubling, to say the least.